Hey everyone, I'm joined today by Lisa Sarayeldin. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for having me.
So great to have you on. So, for those listening, Lisa is a mum of two. She is also a writer, the founder of Endless Possibilities Journal for Children, the author of a newly published self-development book, Love More, and a life coach supporting many individuals. I don't know how you do it all, Lisa, but kudos.
Thank you. Sometimes I don't know how I do it all either, but I just do it. So yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. And look, based on your story and your expertise, I thought you would be perfect to bring on to help us sort of delve into this particular confession from our dad listener. So what I'll do is I'll
Mhm.
get straight into the confession.
Hi, Leonie. It's great to have the opportunity to be on the show. My confession is this. My wife and I met young, in our early 20s, and now have two teenage kids. We have drifted apart for, I'd say, the past 5 years. I think we both acknowledge that the relationship is over, but we're staying together for the kids. Also, culturally, it's unacceptable to divorce. Part of me wonders if it's worth wasting time in a relationship which we both know is over, just for the kids. I'm wondering if other parents have been in this position before. It'd be good to get some perspective. Thanks.
So look, that hence why, Lisa, you were one of the first people that I thought to call upon. Tell our audience a little bit about your story and the
Mhm.
synergies between that and the caller.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, my story is I am a single mum of two. I have been separated for about 5 years now, divorced for three of those. And yeah, my whole reason of not wanting to leave initially was for the kids. Like that was my main concern, and I didn't want to do it because of that. They were in the back of my mind. So yeah, single mum of two. I get it. I get why it's so challenging to leave. But I suppose there's so much to think about, whether to stay or leave. And you do have to counter in the fact of your children, but I think you also need to think about what feels right and what does it mean to live in your truth. Um, so yeah, being separated and doing it on my own for 5 years now has definitely come with challenges. Like I'm not going to sit here and say that it's easy. And often people think it's the easy option to leave, but it definitely is not easy. But I know that I'm living in my truth, and that's what makes the situation easy than staying in a marriage where you're not essentially happy. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit of background about me. For our listener and listeners, I mean, we have to. There's so much in that we need to think about. It's not an easy decision, and it's not something that can be based off or taken lightly, I should say. There are a lot of people in this situation. So when it's dad asks, are there a lot of people? Yes, most of my clients I find are in the exact same situation, and they're like, well, we can't do that, especially when it isn't acceptable and it's not seen as something that you kind of go for, And a lot of people think, oh, I came into this marriage, so I must stay in it. And if you can and if it feels right, then I say like go for it. But there's a lot more to it than just staying in a relationship for the children.
Were you afraid of the external opinions if you were going to, in breaking up?
Yeah, that was probably one of the hardest. That was one of the things I did think about the most. Like,
Mm.
what was everyone going to say? How were my kids going to handle it was the first thing. And then
Hmm.
how was everybody else in my life going to handle it? And I knew they wouldn't handle it well. And for a lot of people, they didn't. And so that was my fear around making the decision whether to stay or leave. And I stayed in that fearful state for a very long time because I was so worried about how the kids would handle it, how family would handle it, because they didn't see it coming. And I think even if people do see it coming, it still doesn't make it easier. The
Mm.
fear is still there. It's that unknown, um, that you don't really know what's going to happen. So it's like the opinions of others definitely have an impact on it had an impact on whether I was stayed or left. And
Hmm.
after a while, I chose to to leave.
You left when your children were quite young. How old were they?
So they were both 1 3 and 1 4.
So how did you know that this wasn't just a bit of a phase of life which was going to be quite challenging? I mean, I've got a 2 and 4-year-old, and it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy for 4 years, and certainly it's tested our relationship too. I'm just curious. I know everyone is different, and everyone has their certain boundaries and the things that they will be pushed towards before they say enough. But I was just curious, for those listening as well, how do you know it's not just a tough phase of life?
Yeah, I mean, it's very circumstantial. It's very dependent on people's relationships. I mean, I went into a marriage when I was very young. Like, I had been with my partner from 16. I got married at 20, and then I had my first child at 25. And, you're very different to who you are at 16, and then who you are at 20, and then at 25. And for me, I went through a massive spiritual growth at 29. And something happened where I think I woke up. Like, I kind of say it was my awakening. I did everything right. I got married, and I had the house, and I had an amazing and supportive partner. And I was a school teacher as well. And I was doing all the things that a good girl does, essentially. And then at 29, I broke free, and I thought, who am I? I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so unsure about life and the decisions I was making. And then all these thoughts started to come in my mind as to, like, why do I not love my husband anymore? And why am I not growing in this relationship? And so I think there's a lot of questions that need to happen before a decision is made. And I did a lot of coaching myself. And now I ask my clients a lot of questions. I don't necessarily give them advice. People often say to me, just tell me whether to stay or leave. And I'll say to them, I can't make that decision for you. I'm sorry, I can't make that. But what I do is I ask questions like, have you done everything to save your marriage? And are you willing to learn a little bit more about your partner's love language, and for you to share your love language? And, what's your why behind why you want to leave, and are you meeting your core needs of, like, significance and connection and certainty and variety? And are you being able to do that for your partner? And then also, like, are you growing and contributing in this relationship? And are you helping their growth and contribution? So there's a lot of questions that need to happen. And I was fortunate enough to get that guidance and help when I was making my decision. I think a lot of people base a decision on the now, and they don't get external help. And they're like, well, I'm just leaving because I'm not happy. And I think there's a lot more that needs to go through that. It's really good to, like, navigate this process with somebody. So I think that it's a hard decision to just say, is it now or temporary? And that's why I think you need some external help, not so much from family or friends. I would say from, like, a coach or a counselor, just to ask those questions to get you thinking about, is it just now, or has this been actually going on for so long that everything's just been suppressed?
Yes, I hear you. That's such good advice. Curious, did you or do you encourage others to do couples therapy as well as working on themselves?
Yeah. I did couples therapy. I then did my own therapy during my process because I was so terrified to make the decision. And so I tried the couples. I also knew that there was a lot going on internally within me that I needed to heal. Like, my inner child, there was a lot of, like, anxiety and stress related things going inside that I knew I had to heal. So I loved that I did my own healing and then had couples counseling. So I always recommend healing first, though. I think almost everyone needs some type of healing, and that you're never really there. Even now, I still see my coach, and I still do a lot of healing myself. So I think, when people do their own type of healing, and then they can do couples, if that's something they choose to do, there's a lot of shared understanding that goes on in couples counselling, because there's an external person asking questions and allowing time for each person to talk. Sometimes you don't even get a chance to say what you want to say to your partner because you're fearful of hurting their feelings, or you can't even get a word in because they're on a rage.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I need to let that person talk, but then you kind of suppress your emotions.
Yeah. and you're mindful of, particularly if you've got children, like our audience do, predominantly, you're mindful of the dynamics and how of the household and how long you're going to drag out an argument and what your kids are going to be privy to. And I know in my household, it's tough to get a few words in when the kids are around because everyone always needs you and you're getting pulled away and, it's really difficult. So, I mean, I've actually we did about 3 sessions of couples counselling after my first child. So, and it wasn't that we were in, dire straits or anything like that, but I think there was such a build-up of resentment from my perspective because I was like, well, hold on. I've got this whole other life outside the baby too. I love my child, don't get me wrong. But just naturally, your life, my husband's life was kicking on and I was feeling the brunt of having to juggle it all. And I think, I mean, I speak to so many couples through the podcast. This is probably the number one resentment. And it doesn't necessarily have to be male, female, the men go off to work. It can be vice versa or for same-sex couples. Just regardless of your relationship dynamic, there's always one person who will do more with the children. And some are happy to do that and others are resentful. And I felt I wasn't getting recognition in my role in doing more. And all it took was to actually voice that with a third party and, me to hear his side of the story too.
Yes.
And then, we're a lot more mindful of each other's needs. So I guess also to those out there who might not be at this point, like this particular caller is, who's like, mate, we're out of here. I'm over it. But, it's more like these little niggling things are coming up for them like it was for me. I would very much encourage people to similarly, seek out an expert to support you.
Yeah, and I always encourage them. I'm like, don't just come to me when you are at breaking point or when you have made your decision. Like, I'm grateful to have those clients, but I always say to a lot of my audience, come before that. Like, we don't want you to get to breaking point. People are like, you advocate divorce. I don't advocate divorce. I advocate happiness and living from within and being at peace, but also understanding that other person, listening, finding out what the actual problem is, because often when there is an argument, that's never the real issue. No. There's so much underlining, and it is that resentment or that I'm not being appreciated or that I'm not being heard or I feel like I'm doing so much. There's so much pressure on me as a parent that the resentment develops and then the pain develops. But if you just give me a bit of self-care, like if you just give me some time to do self-care, or if you just say thank you or hug and kiss me when you walk through the door, or just take the kids for 10 minutes, so many problems can be resolved. And it's incredible when you work with people, but it's also just creating that awareness in people. And that's what I love to do. I don't tell people what to do. I create an awareness in them, and then they can make decisions based on that awareness.
Oh, 100%. I love that. And even to this particular dad who's called in, I mean, it does seem as though he has come to some sort of conclusion in his relationship that perhaps it is over and perhaps they are just staying for the kids. But I mean, I'd encourage him, if he hasn't already, to perhaps, keep in mind these sort of things that we're saying, because I think it's not over till it's over. And so I guess, appreciate and totally respect if it is over. But if you're kind of sitting there going, I'm pretty sure it is, but, there are so many other things that can be out there that can support you through this really difficult time.
Yeah. And I think that's a really valid point. You really need to be 100% certain of this. And they say that most of the time that, especially the female, there's something about when females make the decision to leave, they're 100% certain. And, there are a lot of males that are like that as well. But because we are very much overthinkers, we've thought about this process so much that it's usually quite certain. But you really want to be 100% certain before you make that decision, whether to stay or leave. So, getting that external help and finding out about who you are as a person. Like, I really encourage people to seek counselling or coaching before any decisions are made, just so they find out who they are and what their learning styles are like. Like, it could just be as simple as, we have such different learning styles. Some people are very kinesthetic. They base their decisions off feelings. And then other people are very auditory digital. And so they need, logic, and they need instructions, and they need a lot of language. So finding out how you learn and your partner learns, it could just be as simple as that. And then communicating that to that person would change the whole dynamic of things. And then that could help, with the kids as well. So yes, being 100% certain is what I encourage before any decision is made.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me about once you'd made that decision to
Mm,
leave, what was the next steps in getting your kids across all of that? I mean, I guess 3 and 4, I'm thinking about my
yeah.
little ones, I'm saying to them, mum and dad's not going to live here or mum's not going to live here anymore. They'd probably be like, why? But not really
Ye-
need a really comprehensive response. So how did you go
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah, it was that was probably one of the most challenging things, like telling family that
Mm,
I was choosing to leave when they were looking for, I suppose, a reason, like a tangible reason, was one thing. And then for my kids, that was also very challenging because they were very young and I had to find age appropriate language. So I suppose them being a little bit younger, I had that favor on my side. When you're moving into, under 10s or teens,
mm,
it's very different dynamics, it's very different language. So
yeah.
what I did was be as open as I could be and use language that they understood. I just said that mummy and daddy are not living together anymore. We're going to be living with mummy on these days, and you'll be with daddy on these days. And it's not that we don't love you. We just no longer love each other enough to stay in the marriage. And there was a lot of confusion because they were so
Mm,
young. But I found that as they got older, and even now they're now 7 and 8, they will ask me still, and they'll still try and understand it because they can't completely comprehend it. But because I am a kinesthetic learner and I base everything, all my decisions off feelings, and so are both my kids, we use language like it just feels right for mummy to be on her own. And this is what makes my soul happy, and this is what makes my heart happy, and this is how I needed to grow and to learn. And this feels right. So I feel like because I'm always using that language and I'm always talking about it, there is some level of understanding there. But depending on, some children that need a lot of explanation and they need to know what's happening. These are the days that we're with mum. These are the days that we're with dad. Why did you do this? Is why I did it. So it depends very much on the child and the age of the child. So you really need to know your child and be very prepared for what you are going to say when you're going into this.
yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing you mentioned there was quite interesting and probably quite relatable to a lot of people's experience. What if there's not just one big tangible thing that I can say
Mm,
to the family? Oh, well, call it I found out he's having an affair and he's running away with her. Like
yes.
that's tangible. People go, oh,
Yes.
right, fair enough.
Yes.
But when it's just
Yes.
kind of like, oh, like it just things aren't sitting right. I feel like we're
Yes.
growing in different directions. People would be like, I'm sure the pushback
What?
would be, well, mate, like you'll be fine. Give it another
Yes.
6 months, 12 months. By
Yes.
next year, you'll be growing in the same direction.
Yes.
Why would you blow your whole
Yes.
family up because of your growth? Like
Yes.
I'm just thinking of
Yes.
like I come from a ethnic background, so like my mum's
Yes.
Greek and
Yeah.
my dad's Nigerian. Both
Yeah.
cultures are very big on you stay, you
Yes.
fight tooth and nail, you
Yes.
suffer through that marriage if you
Until
chose
you
wrong,
die.
too bad. So
Yes.
that's what my Greek relatives would be like. Whatever, like you
Yeah.
grew in different directions. Suck it up, mate. Your kids are the most
Yeah.
important things ever. So how when it's not tangible and obvious to people
Yeah.
as to why you split, like I'm curious from how did you approach that with your
Yeah.
external family?
This was so challenging because that
Mm,
was exactly me.
yeah.
It was so, well, he doesn't do anything wrong. He doesn't hit. He doesn't, he's so
Mm,
nice and he's so good to you. What is wrong
yeah.
with you? And
Yeah.
you can't just do that. Like, what about
Mm,
your kids? And like, people so needed something to hold on to
yeah.
understand it.
Mm,
And for so long, I didn't understand why I was feeling this way. And there was so much guilt and so much pain and so much, grief, I suppose, for the first, 6 to 7 months where I dealt with that on my own and I didn't share that with anyone. Like, I felt for me it was very important to make the decision on my own. The only person I spoke to was my cousin and a counsellor because I felt as though I didn't want the external world to make my decision because I didn't want there to be any resentment or confusion. And so I was very confused as to, oh, but there's nothing really wrong to
mm,
say.
mm.
Um, and I also come from a Lebanese background where it's like you don't leave. Like, even if you're not happy, no one's happy. You
Yeah.
just stay and you just deal with it. And I thought to myself, but I want to be happy. Like I'm
Mm.
choosing to be happy. And I also want to model to my kids what happiness is, what love is, what a healthy relationship, what positive energy is in a house. Like I want them to have that. And how can I expect them to have that if I don't model that? And so for me to be able to explain it to the outside world was very challenging. And I just kept saying, I need to leave because I don't feel like I can grow in this relationship. And I know in my heart I have done everything and anything to save my marriage. I know the wife I was. I know the person I was. You may never understand that, and that's also okay. I stopped trying to make people understand about my decision because no matter how much explaining, they would never understand because they're not in my situation. Like I can never understand somebody else. This is why I'll never judge another person because I'm not in their situation. So I just said, I know this feels right for me, but people found that very hard. And I would say even till now, 5 years later, people still find it very hard and they cannot comprehend it because it's not tangible. And so I just say, this is how I am and this is what felt right. But I feel as though the transition, that there is a shift. People start to see that you grow and you shine and you're using your pain for purpose, and they can see that I'm doing that. And they're like, oh, she's doing really well for herself. Like she's turned her pain into purpose and she's now helping other women and men speak in their truth and find out who they are. Because we're not taught to do that as young people. No. So you're told what to say, what to do, how to be. Be good. That's all. Just be good. Well, what does that mean? Like,
yeah. I know. Growing up for me, it was like always err on the side of certainty. So you get good marks, so you can get into a good school, so you can go to good uni, and then you get a good job, so you can bring in good money to and it's just like follow that. It's not really like
be good.
Just be good. Follow the safe path, marry the safe or whatever. And so you're right. There's never. Well, I mean, I guess I haven't experienced that whole. But what would you like? What feels right to you? I had to learn that as well, and I probably learned that at around 28, 29. I think they call it like the lunar, or what is it?
It's
the Saturn returns or something like
Majority of people will go through a huge growth between 28 to 32, 33.
Right.
And a lot of couples do grow together in that time, and they're the couples you see that kind of excel and can break through that, especially if they've been together from very early ages. But what we find is that you'll have one person that grows and one person who's very content and very happy and just very placid, and that this is enough for them. And this is where the battle comes. It's like, but I want so much more, and I can be so much more, but I struggle to be that in this relationship. And then they're like, oh, well, I can't leave. I'm selfish, and I can't do that to my children. But what you have to really ask yourself, and this was the one thing that really shifted and helped me with my decision, was when my coach said to me, when your daughter is older and she's your age, and if she was in this situation, what would you say to her? And instantly I would say, I want you to be happy and I want you to do what feels right. And that helped me.
Goosebumps when you said that. It's so true. Like,
it is.
What for your own child? So then what do you want for yourself?
Exactly. And that helped me base my decision, where a lot of people, we're so hard on ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to feel happy and what we want because we're so scared of the unknown, of what people will say, of cultural differences.
Yeah.
So it is a very frightening time. I don't downplay it, and I still remember the pain. But I also asked myself, can I stay in this? And is this pain harder than me living a lie for the rest of my life, essentially?
Yeah. It's so true. So to this particular caller who's called in, you are certainly not alone. Hopefully we've normalized this. I mean, obviously, and even to those listening who, as we said, might not be quite at this sort of level of, dynamic in their relationship where they're really feeling like it might be the end of the road. Hopefully this conversation's just given you a little bit more encouragement and motivation to, reflect on yourself, reflect on your relationship and the way in which you're conducting yourself, and think, I feel like marriage is work, like a relationship, even if you're not bloody married, whatever it looks like, it is work. And the longer you're together, particularly when you add elements like children and things to the mix, the more you'll be tested, and it is work, but is it worth putting that work in? And I think fundamentally this is where we've hopefully with, Lisa's brought in some great tools for us to be really thinking about, if we are feeling a bit uneasy in our relationships. Lisa, any sort of final comments, particularly to this dad caller?
I would say get to know yourself. Find out who you are, what you want, get really clear on what is it that you want out of life. In 5 years' time, what do you want to be? What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What does your life look like? So to hone in on like living from within instead of living from outside in. So get to know yourself more and ask yourself these questions. Is what I'm doing healthy for myself, for my partner, for my children? Am I living in my truth? They're really powerful questions. And to figure that out, you can use things like meditation and even simply just going into a quiet space, having a bath, and just asking your unconscious mind, does this feel right? Is this right for me? What do I want? And that's the way in which you're going to get your answers from the inside out.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us more about how we can find out more about you and your work.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at lisa.sarayeldin, and I've also got my website at lfwlifecoaching.com. And so all my programs and all my work is there.
I'll pop those details in the episode notes. I just want to know, final note, tell us a bit about your book.
It's called Love More. I actually have it right here. So it's on the lessons of self-love and love for others. And what it does essentially, it creates so much awareness in your life about your thoughts and how your thoughts impact your feelings, and then how your feelings impact your actions. So what we want to do is create awareness around what is it that you're thinking and why are you thinking these things, because that's going to affect how you feel. And if you're feeling pretty crappy, then you're going to act in that way. But if you change your thinking and you change the perception of your situation, you can then feel a lot happier and lighter, which means then you're going to be a lot nicer to people. So the book is really about creating awareness in your life and a lot of self-love activities in how to just look after yourself and your own well-being, so then you can look after the ones you care about.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you've turned your pain into purpose. It sounds like a fantastic tool for those listening as well. So look, I'll jot your details down in the episode notes so that people can find you and your book and all of the fantastic work that you're doing. Thank you so much again, Lisa, for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.